Theodora Bosanquet, or Theodora Bosanquet, a person you probably haven't heard of. Hello, how are you? Theodora Bosanquet took dictation from the American novelist Henry James from 1907 until his death in 1916. In fact, she took down the words he spoke on his deathbed when he became Napoleon, in his mind anyway. The last thing he said was, "across the border." Theodora Bosanquet was his amanuensis, terrible word to say, and she wrote an insightful essay called Henry James at Work about this intimately distant life of theirs. This was published, Henry James at Work, by Virginia and Leonard Woolf at the Hogarth Press, and it's worth checking out. Theodora wasn't Henry James's first amanuensis. In 1897, after penning millions of words, James began to get serious writer's cramp, as it was called, carpal tunnel syndrome. He began to employ a series of secretaries who sat at their Remington typewriters, his Remington typewriters, whilst he paced, paused, and spoke. Leon Adele, in his biography, Henry James, said some of his friends claimed they could put their finger on the exact chapter in What Maisie Knew when manual effort ceased and dictation began. Here the chapters lengthen, and Henry James's later looser prose style emerges. Quite often, in order to understand a sentence in a novel like The Golden Bowl, the reader needs to work out where the stresses would fall, in other words, exactly how he would have said it. This can be done, but it's an extra labour. One of the reasons James, as a result of producing his text whilst speaking and hearing it rather than handwriting it or typing it himself, this is why he has a reputation of being a hard read. About the change in style that this brought to Henry James, Leon Adele, his biographer, says, doubtless, having a companion always in his workroom had its effect. The actor in him could not resist exhibitory flourishes. Maybe if you were to take up dictating, you would start to flourish in an exhibitory way. You would think that the effects of speak writing, though, would be the opposite, that reading the text would be as easy as listening to someone talk clearly. If you were to adopt dictation as your means, you would still have to do a read-through, really a full draft, checking for soggy sentences. However, the chances of anyone listening to this either wanting to or being able to afford a secretary, an amanuensis, are near zero. Perhaps the last writer to work this way, or at least I thought until I started doing some research of this, outside of corporate executives, was Dame Barbara Cartland. Reclining on a couch, in full makeup, with a Pekingese on her lap, Dame Barbara Cartland would speak her Mills and Boon novels directly to her literary secretary, Mrs. Audrey Elliott, who would take them accurately down in shorthand. With these means of production, Barbara Cartland could, allegedly, produce one novel a day, though I think 10,000 to 15,000 words was probably more normal. She wrote about 24 per month at her peak. In my research, I discovered that Dan Brown, author of The Da Vinci Code, sometimes dictates his first draft, so it is still going. I guess he uses dictation software, and that's where we're going next, because technology has now reached the point where dictation software incorporating AI is almost as good as a human amanuensis. It won't make you a cup of tea if you're having a bad day. I probably won't include this section in the book on drafting, because it will date so quickly, or I'll have to rewrite it before I actually get down to finishing a final draft. AI is much better now at voice recognition and can do corrections on kind of flubs and probably smooth out the prose in an AI kind of way. And it can do rational punctuation, and it does all these things much better than it did a few years ago. I'm talking about Microsoft Word, speech-to-text, Otter, Apple Dictation, or that kind of suite of products, Dragon Professional Individual, Dragon Professional Anywhere. When I began to get a jabbing pain in the tendons of my hands whilst typing a few years ago, I looked into dictation software that my university could offer, and they had access to Dragon. but in a couple of weeks the pain stopped and I gave up the idea. Later though, I did try Dragon, but not on the desktop. That version was too expensive, that was professional individual. However, the in-phone version was much more reasonable per month, and I used it to get most of the second year of a writer's diary onto the computer and out of the diary. Although annoyingly inaccurate to begin with and capable of retyping delete, delete, delete many times without sussing that delete was a command, not the next word, I did get used to it, and it did learn my voice. I had to copy across chunks of text from notes, and they didn't go straight into Word, but overall I found it a little faster than retyping. So do you use dictation software, or do you have a Theodora Bosanquet sitting by your side when you type your comments in? Please let me know. Please like and share this if you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you soon.